I walked into the will reading, bracing to watch my aunt take everything my grandmother promised me, and I walked out with the keys, while my aunt left with nothing but a warning letter from the bank and a date with a judge. They all underestimated one quiet sentence I kept to myself until the room was full and the recorder was on. Justice did not roar that day. It clicked like a safe opening. Narrator's name, Jenna Hart. You clicked this because the title and thumbnail promised that I exposed a family lie at a will reading and flipped a $450,000 inheritance. That is exactly what happened. This is the story I tell on my channel, After Her Lies, where I cover family, money, and justice. I am 34. I live in Cincinnati, and I have receipts, dates, and the words that changed a room. If you have ever been cornered by someone who thinks you will break as long as they raise their voice, listen to this, because I did not shout, I prepared. My grandmother was named Evelyn Hart. She raised me from the time I was 11. My mother was not well, and my father drifted out and never came back. Evelyn put me through community college. She taught me to reconcile a checkbook to the penny. She made the kind of banana bread that made the neighbors talk from the sidewalk. She had 2 children of her own. Her son, my father, is the one who left. Her daughter, my Aunt Deborah, stayed. Deborah has always had the loudest opinions and the keys to other people's cars, figuratively and literally. She is the kind of person who collects favors and insists they were gifts. She is the kind who wears perfume that announces itself 10 minutes early. By the end of 2023, my grandmother was 82. Her house, a small brick 2-bedroom on Maple View with a blue door, was paid off. The latest assessment had it around $312,000. She had a checking account that floated between $20,000 and $30,000. She owned a little life insurance policy, $50,000 on paper, mostly meant for burial and a cushion. The big number, the one everyone counted in their heads, even if they never said it out loud, lived in her will. $450,000. Between the house, the policy, and savings, that was the ballpark. The will had been drawn up in 2019 by Harper and Young, a neighborhood firm, and she had added a codicil in 2021. She told me the codicil was protection. I did not understand what that meant then. By the time I did, it was too late for her, but not for her money. When she fell in January, it was a slow slide. January 12, 2024, she slipped on the back steps, putting water out for a stray cat she never admitted was hers. She fractured her hip. In late February, she was readmitted because of a urinary tract infection that turned into confusion. That was when Aunt Deborah stepped in with a paper that said durable power of attorney across the top. The date on it was July 8, 2019. She waved it at nurses and told me, and anyone else who stood close enough, that she would be handling decisions. I asked for a copy. She said she did not have to show me anything. She told a nurse to put me on the visitor list between 2 and 4, and when they did, she smirked in the way that drags you back to being 17 and powerless. She took my grandmother's phone, her checkbook, and her tiny blue leather wallet that had a photo of me at 13 with braces. At the funeral, March 29, she delivered a eulogy that was mostly about her sacrifice, how she put her own life on hold to be there. She mentioned the house 3 times. She joked about how she had learned to love the smell of hospital bleach and the taste of vending machine coffee. She walked past me as the family rose to follow the casket and whispered that she had found a buyer already. The woman next to me heard her and did a small, startled laugh. I looked at my shoes. Beige pumps. I had bought them on sale the week before because my old funeral flats had split at the toe. After the burial, Deborah took me by the arm so hard my sleeve shifted and told me the attorney would be calling about the will. She said there would be no surprises. She told me to behave. There were very clear stakes. The will, the executor, the house, and the 450,000 that had become the number even people who insist money is vulgar could say in a low, resentful voice. She had the power of attorney, the bank access, and 2 months of nurses and receptionists who thought she was in charge. I had my channel, a small emergency fund, and a bad feeling. I also had a memory. In September of the year before, my grandmother had asked me to drive her to Harper and Young. September 15, 2023. She wore her good cardigan and her hair was puffed up the way she liked when she felt serious. She spoke softly to a woman named Ms. Diaz, who kept a notary stamp in a case that clicked shut. My grandmother had walked out holding a white envelope with a blue sticky note. She told me that day that sometimes you have to take your keys back before someone steals the car. She said it without bitterness. Then she asked if I wanted soup. She had printed something at the library the week before. She did not say the words power of attorney. I did not ask. I drove her to Panera, and we ate broccoli cheddar and thought we had all the time in the world. The first obstacle was access. After my grandmother died, Harper and Young confirmed that a will existed, that I was a named beneficiary, and that there would be a reading when the death certificate arrived. The administrator said 4 p.m., April 16. She also told me the will named an executor. She would not tell me who. The second obstacle was proof. Deborah had the 2019 power of attorney. Even if it died with my grandmother, the bank would ask whether any transactions were made in those final weeks. Deborah would smile and say she handled bills. My grandmother never liked conflict. The worst word she ever used was rude. If she suspected her daughter of abuse, she would couch it in a metaphor and a soup invitation. If I was going to protect that 450,000, I needed more than a feeling and a YouTube channel. I needed what my grandmother had set in motion, and a way to light it clearly in a room full of family and formal greetings. I started with paper. I keep a binder on my desk with pre-order tabs, the kind that make people think you are either a genius or obsessive. The cover said, Evelyn Estate in block letters. April 2, I went to the bank, where my grandmother had kept her checking account since 1996. I did not pretend to be the executor. I brought a copy of the obituary and my ID. I asked for the branch manager. His name was Robert. He had kind eyes and a tie that was a little too long. He told me plainly that without letters of authority or a court order, he could not hand me statements. I did not argue. I asked a different question. I asked if a power of attorney is void at death. He said yes, immediately. Then I asked when the last transaction occurred. He said he could not tell me, but he could explain policy. Accounts are flagged when a customer dies. He spoke slowly, like someone reading off a page in his mind. I thanked him. I did not leave. I stood there. He looked at me for a beat, then down at his desk, then back to me. He said that sometimes people use cards or checks after death without realizing the slope they are on. He said that when that happens, the bank documents everything for the estate. He said the word affidavit. He did not hand me anything. He did not have to. I walked out with nothing in my hands and a plan in my head. I am not a lawyer. I am a bookkeeper by training and a storyteller by work. But I live in Ohio, and Ohio is a one-party consent state for recording. I knew that. I talk about it on my channel because people ask me how I gather my stories. April 4, I called Aunt Deborah and asked her when I could pick up my grandmother's recipe box. It was a safe topic. She brightened, told me she had already set aside what she thought I would want, and told me to stop by the house Friday at 10. When I hung up, I set my phone to record. I wrote myself a script. I told myself to be calm. I told myself not to accuse, not to raise my voice, and to stay curious. I arrived at 10 on a day with high blue sky. She had the front door open, the screen door latched, her perfume floating through the mesh. She had put the recipe box on the dining table next to a vase of tulips that still had the plastic sleeve on the stems. There were papers everywhere. Some of them were envelopes with windows. I asked her how she was doing. She told me grief is a job. She told me again that there would be no surprises at the will reading. Then, as if it were small talk, she mentioned she had been calling the bank to make sure automatic payments did not bounce, and that she might need to move some money between accounts. I asked her what accounts. She said the ones she had access to. I asked if the power of attorney she used was still in effect. She told me it did not matter, that she had to keep the lights on. I asked when she last used the card. She said March 31. Then she said April 1, but only to pay the Duke energy bill. She laughed and said, everybody knows bills do not care about funerals. She was loose with the truth and the timeline because she wanted credit for competence. She wanted me to be impressed. After she made herself the main character of the kitchen again, I asked if I could have the mail that had my name on it. I did not expect anything. She slid a stack of papers toward me, more to clear space than to grant a request. In that stack was a white envelope with the Harper and Young letterhead and a blue sticky note. My name was on the note. Inside was a copy of a document dated September 15, 2023. It was one page. It said revocation of durable power of attorney. It named my grandmother. It named Deborah as the agent being revoked. It carried a notary stamp and the signature of Ms. Diaz. It was the exact same day I had driven her in silence and soup. My mouth went dry. I turned the paper over and looked at the back as if all the weight was hiding there. My aunt had not read it, or she did not believe it. My grandmother had pulled her keys well before she died. And then I saw the clause nobody expected. The codicil. The document that looked innocent next to the revocation carried a paragraph that felt like my grandmother's soft voice, hardening into something that could not be moved. It read like this, in clear, simple words. Any person who has acted under a power of attorney or as a fiduciary within 2 years before my death must provide a full accounting to the personal representative and beneficiaries. If that person has engaged in self-dealing, used my funds for their own benefit, or transferred assets outside the ordinary course, that person shall be deemed to have predeceased me for purposes of this will. It went further. It said any inter vivos transfer of my residence within 90 days before my death is void and shall be returned to the estate. It named the house at Mapleview. It referenced an assessor parcel number. It referenced a trust protector, a role I had never encountered, named in case someone tried to pressure my grandmother. The language was not cruel. It was precise. There was a line about peace being worth planning for. I made copies. I took photos and backed them up twice. I printed 3 sets. I called Harper and Young and asked whether the codicil was filed with the will. The assistant said yes. I asked whether the revocation had been sent to the bank. She said a courtesy copy had been mailed September 18, and that a certified letter had been signed for September 20. I asked by whom. She said D. Hart, my aunt's initials and last name. She said the return receipt was in the file. Her voice was calm. She did not know she was telling me the shape of the trap my grandmother had set. That night, April 5, I sat with the binder and added a tab labeled revocation. I added another labeled codicil. I added a third labeled bank. Then I went quiet. It got uglier before it got clear. Word leaked that my grandmother had left me something substantial. Deborah called my cousin, Max, her son, and told him I was trying to take his inheritance. He is 20. He is in community college for auto tech. He called me and asked me why I was doing this to his mother. I told him I was not doing anything to her. He hung up. My sister Lucy, who lives in Dayton, told me she wanted no part in drama. She said that life is short. She said that if Deborah sold the house and kept the proceeds, that was between her and a God she claimed not to believe in. She told me to be kind. She was the kind of kind that forgets that kindness without boundaries is surrender. Then, on April 10, a thick manila envelope arrived at my apartment. It was from the bank. It was addressed to the estate of Evelyn Hart, attention personal representative. Inside were copies of flagged transactions and a cover letter. The bank had decided to send them directly to the estate attorney, and I was on the CC because I was a named beneficiary. The cover letter said that on March 27, a cashier's check for $22,500 was drawn payable to Deborah Hart. It said that on March 30, an attempt to initiate a wire transfer for $48,000 was made to an account ending in 62 that matched the name of Deborah's boyfriend. It said the wire failed because of the death flag. It included the word clawback. It used a phrase I had only heard on shows before, suspected elder financial exploitation. The bank had sent a copy to Harper and Young. I had not asked for this. The codicil and the revocation had done their work. I still had to stand up. A paper can be ironclad and still go limp if you let someone shout over it. 2 days before the will reading, I rehearsed. I read the codicil out loud. I read it until the words did not tremble in my mouth. I highlighted the sentence that started with any person who has acted under a power of attorney. I printed tabs with titles like accounting, revocation, bank letter, and trust protector. I wrote a 1-page statement in plain language. I reminded myself that the truth does not need flourishes. It needs air and witnesses. I told myself not to call my aunt names. I told myself to speak to the process and the paper. I decided not to show anyone what I had until the room was full. I did not tease it to my audience. I did not post hints. I have learned on my channel that the fastest way to lose a case is to litigate it on Facebook while the other side takes notes. I did share one line with my subscribers that sometimes a single sentence can weigh more than a shout. I slept badly, the kind of sleep that leaves dents in your morning. On April 16, the conference room at Harper and Young smelled like lemon cleaner and new carpet. There were 2 pitchers of water and a tray of pretzels. The estate attorney, a man named Mr. Kellerman with a square jaw and kind eyes, sat at the head of the table. He introduced Miss Diaz, the notary who would witness signatures for the acknowledgments. She wore a navy blazer and had her hair half pulled back. Deborah swept in with Max and her boyfriend, Ron, the one with the account ending in 62. She wore a white blouse and large gold hoops that bounced when she talked. My sister came late, with a face that tried to be a blank page. There were 2 other cousins, children of my grandmother's late sister, who looked bored and slightly hopeful. The recorder light blinked. Mr. Kellerman set it on the table, said the date, April 16, 2024, and the time, 4:06. He explained this was a will reading, not a court hearing, and that we were there to understand the plan Evelyn had made. He asked everyone to silence their phones. Deborah announced that as the executor, she would like to speak first. Mr. Kellerman blinked twice and asked her to wait. He read the opening of the will. The standard things. She was of sound mind. She revokes prior wills. She appoints a personal representative. He stopped and read the name. He said, Jenna Marie Hart. He looked at me. Deborah's mouth made a shape I had not seen since I was a teenager, and she found out I had gotten a job without asking her opinion. she started to talk. He held up his hand and said that the will controlled. He noted that there had been a power of attorney during life, but that this was a death instrument and that the roles are different. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were letters of authority for the probate submission. I did not smile. I did not look at my aunt. I kept my eyes on the table, where someone had carved a thin line in the wood with a key once, and no one had sanded it out. He continued. Specific bequests. My grandmother's cluster diamond ring to my sister, with the notation that it had belonged to my great-grandmother first. Her Singer sewing machine to a cousin who actually knew how to thread a bobbin. $1,000 to the church where she had folded bulletins. Her recipe box to me, with a line about how she knew I would film my hands, and a cutting board and tell stories. Then he got to the house. He read that the house at Mapleview was to pass to the residuary, and that the residuary would be divided in 3 equal shares. 1 to me, 1 to my sister, 1 to Max in trust until he turns 25. He read that if any beneficiary was found to have engaged in financial exploitation, that beneficiary would be deemed to have predeceased. He paused. He looked around the room. He asked whether anyone had questions about the language before he read the codicil. Deborah cleared her throat like a foghorn. She said she had a power of attorney from 2019 and that she had used it to keep the lights on. She said she had a buyer for the house who would give cash. She said the family would thank her when the checks arrived. She started to stand. He read the codicil. He read it as if he had practiced. He read the part about any person who has acted under a power of attorney within 2 years. He read the part about self-dealing and being deemed to have predeceased. He read the part about inter vivos transfer of the residence within 90 days being void. He read the paragraph about notice to the bank and the return receipt dated September 20, 2023. He read the name Ms. Diaz. He asked Ms. Diaz to confirm. She nodded and said that she had personally notarized the revocation of the power of attorney on September 15, 2023, in the presence of Evelyn and another witness. She named the stamp number. She slid a copy of the notary journal log to the center of the table. The stamp, the journal, the date. It was all there in blue-black ink. Deborah's face flushed a red that moved down her neck like dye in water. She opened her mouth and found no air. Mr. Kellerman then opened a second folder. He said that the bank had sent a letter dated April 10. He used the words suspected elder financial exploitation, which made Ron shift in his chair and glance at the door. He read the part about the cashier's check for $22,500 made to Deborah Hart on March 27. He read the attempted wire on March 30 for $48,000 to an account ending in 62. He explained in slow words how you explain to people who already know but will pretend they do not, that a power of attorney expires at death, and that using it after death is void. He said the bank had frozen or reversed any transactions after March 29. He said the bank had provided copies to the estate. He slid them across the table to me. I slid them back. I told him to continue. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingers. Deborah found her voice. She said the codicil was a trick. She said our grandmother was confused in September. Ms. Diaz said no. She said she had a capacity checklist, and Evelyn had passed. She said she knew Evelyn. She had notarized her signature on church forms and raffle baskets for years. She said Evelyn came alone and steady. She said Evelyn cracked a joke about soup. Mr. Kellerman added that the codicil had been prepared in 2021, long before the fall. He said the revocation had been mailed to the bank by certified mail and that it had been signed for. He asked whether Deborah's initials were D. Hart. Deborah did not answer. Max looked at his hands. He is 20, and he looked 12 for a second. In that second, I saw the boy who built a Lego firehouse on the floor while the adults argued. I asked whether I could say something. I kept my voice level. I said that I loved my grandmother. I said that she taught me to stand with my feet flat on the floor and my shoulders even. I said she told me that when someone makes noise, sometimes the right thing to do is to say the quiet truth on paper. I said I had a recording from a conversation with Deborah on April 5, in which she confirmed that she continued to use the accounts after March 29. I said I knew the room did not need it. I said I would not play it. I said I would include it in the file if needed for the accounting. I said I wanted to make sure Max heard something clearly. I looked at him. I said that his trust share was intact and safe. It would be managed by a trustee, independent, with distributions for tuition and rent, and the principal would be his at 25. The trust language was right there. I asked Mr. Kellerman to read it. He did. It named a local bank trust department as trustee. It had a schedule of permitted expenses. It was dry reading. It was the kind of dry that protects futures. There was more. Deborah had done a thing she thought was clever. She had a quitclaim deed prepared on March 28, the day before our grandmother died, transferring the Mapleview house from Evelyn to Deborah with love and affection and $10 consideration. She had found a traveling notary and a neighbor as a witness. She had filed it with the county recorder April 1. She had told people the house was already hers. The codicil had anticipated that. It said that any transfer within 90 days would be void and returned to the estate. Mr. Kellerman had already filed a notice of claim with the recorder's office. The deed was a piece of paper that looked official and meant nothing. He explained this, and I watched Ron's face close like a store at 9 o'clock. Deborah started to cry, the way toddlers do when no one is looking at them. It was deep and theatrical. No one handed her a tissue. I took one and placed it near her hand. I told her to wipe her face because this was not the worst room she would sit in. She glared at me. There is a kind of hatred that burns out its own oxygen. Then the conversation turned to accountability. The codicil required an accounting within 60 days. Mr. Kellerman said he would need statements for the last 2 years, receipts, and any explanation for transactions that were not ordinary. He said that if there was self-dealing, the forfeiture clause would apply, and that he would advise the estate to pursue surcharge. He explained surcharge in 2 sentences. It is a polite word that means you took money that was not yours, and you will pay it back. He said criminal charges were a separate matter. He said Adult Protective Services had been notified by the bank as a matter of policy. He said this part while looking at his legal pad, not at my aunt, because sometimes mercy is making a point without pinning it to a face. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people hear air conditioning for the first time. Deborah dabbed at her eyes and said she was only doing what needed to be done. She said she had planned to pay everything back. She said she had been told that as power of attorney, she could take a fee. Mr. Kellerman said fees are authorized by agreement or statute, not by impulse, and that they are reasonable and documented. He asked to see her documentation. She had none. The recording light blinked. Time moved. The reading ended at 5:52. Ms. Diaz notarized the acknowledgement of receipt of will copy and codicil. Her stamp was neat and firm. I carried my folder out and down the hall and did not stop in the lobby. I did not stop at the water fountain. In the parking lot, the sky was turning that gray that makes you pull your sleeves down. I sat in my car and let my head touch the steering wheel just once. Then I drove home to my tiny apartment above a hair salon and took off my beige pumps and stood barefoot on the kitchen tile. The phone lit up. Messages from my sister. Silence from Max. An email from Mr. Kellerman summarizing next steps. A second email, copying a letter sent to the bank trust department. The process had teeth. There is a relief that feels like a distant train coming towards you. The right train, the one you were waiting for, not the one barreling past. You asked for a story about justice. Here is what justice looked like over the next months, in exact words and numbers. Deborah refused to provide a complete accounting. She gave a jumble of receipts. She said she had lost track of some. She said the dog ate them, in essence. The bank produced a tidy stack that did not care about stories. There were cash withdrawals of $3,000 on February 14 and March 11. There were purchases at boutiques and a salon that did not look like hospital errands. There was a Best Buy television for $1,299, delivered to her address, the week my grandmother was in rehab. There were ATM withdrawals on March 29, the day of the funeral. The cashier's check for $22,500 was endorsed twice, once by Deborah, once by a title company. She had made an earnest money deposit on a condo. The attempted wire to Ron's account was the down payment. The bank had stopped it. The adult in the room had been a policy and a piece of paper, not a person. The codicil had snapped shut like a seatbelt. We did not go to trial. A thing I have learned from running a channel about family and money is that the thing people fear most is not jail. It is discovery. Discovery is the part where your texts and your bank statements and your voice, when you're not performing for the church, potluck show up on paper with tabs and labels. Deborah hired a lawyer. He had a loud tie and a quiet voice. He told her she had a problem. He called it exposure. He told her the no contest clause meant if she fought, she could lose even the things the will would generously have given her if she had behaved. He told her about surcharge and interest. He told her about the bank's duty to file reports. He told her that Adult Protective Services does not like it when people treat vulnerable elders like checking accounts. He negotiated. On June 27, we signed a settlement. Deborah relinquished any claim to the estate. She agreed to repay the $22,500 within 90 days. She signed a confession of judgment. She agreed to cooperate in unwinding any other transfers. She agreed not to contact Max about the case. She signed, Miss Diaz stamped. The document was solid in a way that tears are not. There were consequences. The county recorder voided the quitclaim deed and recorded the will-related notice. The title was clear. I listed the Mapleview house in August. It went on the market at $319,000, and we accepted an offer for $312,000 after inspection found a soft spot near the back steps where she had slipped. I stood in the empty living room the day before closing and ran my hand along the doorframe where my height had been penciled in 10 times. The numbers were almost rubbed out from years of hands. I took a photo. I cried, soft, into my sleeve. The life insurance company paid out $50,000 less taxes and fees to the estate on July 10. We paid the funeral home $8,300. We paid Harper and Young for their fees, which were fair and detailed. We reimbursed me for the stamps and the long afternoons. We funded Max's trust with his 1/3. The trustee schedule set his tuition payments to his community college and a monthly stipend for his rent, $700 a month, with checks that would not bounce because we had done the math. He called me in October and said, "Thank you." He said he had not known what to say in April. He said he had been scared. He said he was sorry. I said I knew. As for Deborah, the bank filed its report. Adult Protective Services did their investigation. The county prosecutor did not bring charges, not right away, not for the cash withdrawals. That is the real world. Justice is often a ledger with margins. But the settlement had teeth. When the 90 days came, she delivered a cashier's check for $22,500 to Harper and Young. She sold her condo dream and moved into a rental with Ron. Their relationship did not survive the settlement. He liked fast money and slower responsibilities. She kept the car and the perfume and started volunteering at the church again. She stopped talking to me. She unfriended me, and then she sent my sister a long text about betrayal. My sister sent me a screenshot because that is how families sometimes communicate across minefields. I did not respond. There is a kind of dignity that lives in silence and invoices. I kept filming. I told the story to my audience when the settlement was signed and the house was sold. I used real numbers and blurred names when it made sense. I showed the tabs on my binder. I talked about the codicil and the revocation. I encouraged people to add the clause my grandmother had chosen, the one that required accounting and set a consequence. Lawyers watching wrote to me and said it had another name, a forfeiture provision tied to fiduciary abuse, and they wished more people would use it. Viewers wrote to me and told me about siblings and stepfathers and caretakers who became cartographers of other people's money. I told them that a quiet line on a clean page can hold the weight of a life. I told them that shouting is often the soundtrack of someone losing. The money did not make me righteous. It did not erase the ache of seeing the blue front door close for the last time. It did not make Thanksgiving simple. It did give me options. I put my share, 1/3 of what was left after costs, into a high-yield savings account for 3 months, then into a mix of index funds and a rainy day fund for the channel. I hired a part-time researcher. I kept the ring safe from my sister until she was not angry at the world. I bought a new pair of black flats that will not split. I paid my rent on time and in full. I bought a new cutting board and filmed a recipe I had filmed before, banana bread, and I did not cry halfway through. My grandmother would have told me to buy good butter and be generous with the vanilla. I can hear her voice when I bake. It is not loud. It is so steady that the air around it feels reliable. There was one more scene that belongs in this story. In November, probate court set a brief hearing to close out the estate. It was in a small courtroom with carpet that had seen a lot of small tragedies. The judge was a woman with salt streaks in her hair and a pen that clicked. She asked me whether I had filed the final accounting. I said yes. She asked whether the beneficiaries had signed receipts and releases. I said yes. She asked whether there were any outstanding claims. I said no. She asked whether I understood my duty had ended. I said I did, and that I still had my grandmother's cutting board because I was unable to let it go. She smiled the way judges smile when they remember they are people. She approved the closing and tapped her pen against the pad twice. It was not a gavel, but it was enough. I walked out with an order and a feeling that is hard to capture on camera. It felt like a house settling after a storm. If you are listening because you're at the beginning of this, if you have a relative with a paper in her hand and perfume that arrives before she does, hear me. Learn the dates. September 15 mattered. The words mattered. The distance between a quiet signature and a loud boast can be the length of a life. Protect your elders with paper that does not blink under pressure. Add the clause. Notify the bank. Keep your texts. Speak only when the recorder light is on, or the person across the table is paid to write down what you say. Be kind, and when kindness is used against you, be clear. People have asked me if I forgave my aunt. Forgiveness is a nice word. It turns sour in some mouths. I am not in charge of her soul. I am in charge of my door my accounts, and my next sentence. I think forgiveness looks like not letting her live rent-free where my decisions are made. It looks like telling this story in a way that scrubs off the shame she tried to smear into my voice. It looks like being clear about money and love in the same breath without treating either like a weapon. When I think of my grandmother, I do not think of legal clauses first. I think of the way she tucked the end of the sheet under the mattress with the kind of precision that makes a thing smoother for the person who lies on it later. That codicil was exactly that. It made the bed of our grief smoother so we could sleep without someone stealing the pillow. The last loose thread is Max. He came over in December. He carried in a toolbox and insisted on fixing the little squeak in my pantry door. He said he wanted to do something that was not money. He is 20. He still wears his hat backward. He told me he signed up for spring classes. He told me he will not be his mother in money. He told me he will pay attention. He took a breath as if the air had been tight in his chest for a year, and now he could finally cough. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup and watched a game with the sound down. He asked me if I ever get tired of being the adult. I told him I am tired a lot, and that it has rewards. He nodded like a person trying on a new size of shirt and deciding it fits. This is after her lies. It is a channel, and it is a way to stand in a room when someone is trying to make you small. If you need to hear someone say that you can be quiet and win, let this be that. If you need to see the numbers and the dates, rewind. They are here. If you need to know that love can be defended without turning mean, listen to the way my grandmother guarded her house with a paragraph that never raised its voice. I walked into that will reading alone. I walked out with a folder, a duty, and the keys to a blue door that would soon belong to a stranger. Justice in my life is made of paper, sentences, signatures, and the smell of lemon cleaner. It is not theatrical. It is exact. It is enough. 96% of viewers are not subscribed, which is wild. If you want more true stories about family, money, and justice, hit subscribe, tap like, and tell me in the comments what part of this story hit you hardest.